Landing my dream job was supposed to be a triumph, a moment of pure celebration with my parents. Instead, it was the night they revealed the shocking price of their love, half my future income, for life. The celebratory clinking of wine glasses felt like something out of a movie. My mom was dabbing at the corners of her eyes with a napkin, a perfect picture of maternal pride. My dad, usually so stoic, had a grin plastered on his face that seemed to stretch from ear to ear. We were at a high-end steakhouse, the kind with white tablecloths and waiters who call you sir, a place my parents had booked the second I called them with the news. I had landed my dream job, a software engineering position at a top tech firm with a starting salary that made my head spin, 6 figures, right out of college. It was the culmination of everything they and I had worked for. "To our son," my dad said, raising his glass of expensive red. "All those late nights studying, all the sacrifices, it paid off. We knew you had it in you, Alex." "We're just so proud," my mom added, her voice thick with emotion. "Our brilliant boy." I felt a warm flush of gratitude and accomplishment. "I couldn't have done it without you guys," I said, and I meant it. The support, the encouragement, and of course the college fund. I know what a huge deal that was. They had always been open about the fund. They'd started it when I was born, a testament to their belief in my future. When it came time for college, they proudly announced they had saved up $50,000 to contribute. It wasn't enough to cover the whole ride at my dream school, so I took out loans for the rest and worked part-time jobs through all 4 years to cover my living expenses. But that $50,000 was the foundation. It was the launch pad that made everything else possible. It was, I thought, the ultimate gift of love. My dad nodded, his smile tightening just a little. "Exactly, Alex. The fund. We need to talk about that. Now that you're starting this new chapter, it's time to discuss the terms of our arrangement." I blinked, confused. Arrangement? What arrangement? I took a sip of water, the ice cubes rattling against the glass. "The investment," my mom clarified, her tone shifting from weepy and proud to something more business-like. It was unnerving. "We invested in your future, sweetie. It was a family investment." My dad leaned forward, placing his forearms on the table. The festive atmosphere in our little booth suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. "That $50,000 wasn't a gift, son. It was seed money. We saw your potential and we backed you. Now we expect a return on that investment." I let out a short, nervous laugh. "A return? Okay. Yeah, of course. Once I get my first few paychecks and get settled, I want to start paying you guys back for the $50,000. I was already planning on it. With interest, even. It's the least I can do." My dad shook his head slowly, his eyes locked on mine. The grin was gone, replaced by a look of stern seriousness I hadn't seen since I crashed his car when I was 17. "No, Alex, you're not understanding. We're not talking about a loan. Paying us back the principal would be an insult to the risk we took. We're talking about a percentage, a partnership." My stomach turned to ice. "A partnership? What are you talking about?" My mom reached across the table and patted my hand, but her touch felt cold. "It's simple, honey. We're your biggest shareholders. We own a stake in your success, so we'll be taking 50% of your salary." The words didn't compute. They floated in the air between us, nonsensical and absurd. I pulled my hand away from hers. 50%? You want half my salary? As in, every month? "That's right," my dad said, as if he were explaining the weather. 50%. Pre-tax, of course. I stared at them, my mouth agape. The sounds of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. Was this a joke? Some bizarre, twisted test of character? Their faces were dead serious. "You can't be serious," I whispered, my voice hoarse. That's insane. That's half my income. For how long? A year? 2 years?" My dad picked up his steak knife, gesturing with it as he spoke. "There seems to be a misunderstanding here, Alex. This isn't a temporary arrangement. We invested in you for the long haul. This is a permanent agreement. 50% of your income for the rest of your career." The air left my lungs. Forever. They wanted half of everything I would ever earn, forever. The dream job, the future I had just started to imagine, a nice apartment, paying off my student loans, maybe traveling, eventually starting my own family. It all evaporated in an instant. I would be working for them. I would be their cash cow for the next 40 years. "No," I said, my voice gaining strength. "Absolutely not. That's not fair. That was never the deal. You never said a word about this." "We didn't need to," my mom said, her voice now sharp and defensive. "It was implied. We're your parents. We sacrificed for you, and now you provide for us. That's how it works." "I'll pay you back the $50,000, I said, my voice rising, drawing a glance from a nearby table. "I'll pay you back double, 100,000, but I'm not signing over half my life to you." My dad sighed, a deep, disappointed sound that grated on my nerves. He reached down into his briefcase, which he'd set on the floor beside him, and pulled out a thin, leather-bound folder. He slid it across the white tablecloth. It stopped right in front of my plate. "That's the thing, son," he said, his voice dropping to a low, chilling tone. "You don't have to sign anything now. You already did." My hand trembled as I reached for the folder. The leather felt cold and alien. Inside, there was a single document printed on heavy, cream-colored paper that looked far too official for a family agreement. The title at the top read, "Family Educational Investment and Future Earnings Agreement." I scanned the dense blocks of legal jargon, my eyes blurring, until they landed on the last page. And there it was, my signature. A slightly sloppier, more youthful version of my handwriting, but unmistakably mine, signed when I was 18 years old. A memory long buried under the stress of exams and the excitement of starting a new life surfaced with sickening clarity. I was at the kitchen table, surrounded by a mountain of college and financial aid paperwork. My dad had slid a final stack in front of me. "Just a few more, Alex. Standard forms for the school to release the funds from our account." I remember being tired, my head swimming with application essays and deadlines. I hadn't read a single word. I trusted them. I just signed where my dad's finger pointed, page after page. "Sign here. Initial here." That trust, I now realized, had been my downfall. I slowly lifted my eyes from the page, the betrayal of physical ache in my chest. "You tricked me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. The clatter of silverware from the next table over sounded like a gunshot in the tense silence. "We protected our interests," my dad corrected, his voice as cold and hard as granite. "And yours. This document ensures you'll never forget the foundation you were built on. It ensures that this family, as a unit, prospers from our collective efforts." "Collective efforts?" I nearly shouted, slamming the folder down on the table. A splash of red wine leaped from my dad's glass onto the white cloth, a dark, spreading stain. "I worked 2 jobs through college. I pulled all-nighters until I thought my brain would bleed. I took out over $100,000 in loans that I have to pay back, not you. You call this a collective effort?" "Language, Alex," my mom chided, dabbing at the wine stain with her napkin as if that were the most offensive thing happening. "We gave you life. We gave you a home. That $50,000 was more than just money. It was our security, our retirement. We gambled it all on you, and a formal agreement was the only sensible thing to do. Sensible? I choked out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. You want 50% forever. That leaves me with less than I'd make at an entry-level job after taxes and my own loan payments. How am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to build my own life? You'll manage, my dad said dismissively. You'll live with us for a few years, save on rent. We'll take care of you. We're a family after all. This is how we take care of each other. The room started to spin. They had it all figured out. I wouldn't just be their income stream. I'd be their live-in ATM, completely under their control. The dream of my own apartment, of independence, was a cruel joke. They weren't investing in my future. They were annexing it. I stood up so fast my chair screeched backwards on the polished floor. The waiter, who had been approaching with a dessert menu, froze in his tracks. I'm not doing this, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I had never felt before. This document, this is coercion. It's fraud. A court will throw this out in a second. My dad actually smiled. It was a thin, cruel smile that didn't reach his eyes. Go ahead, son. Try. Hire a lawyer. Drag your loving parents who sacrificed everything for you through the mud. Tell a judge how ungrateful you are. Let's see how that looks on the 6 o'clock news. Local tech prodigy sues parents over generous college gift. You think your new employer would appreciate that kind of publicity. He knew me too well. He knew my fear of failure, my desperation to make a good impression at this new job. The threat was clear. Fight us, and we will burn your entire life to the ground. I snatched the folder from the table, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had to get out. I threw a handful of bills onto the table, not even counting them. As I turned to leave, my mom's voice called after me, laced with a venomous sweetness. Don't forget to be home for dinner tomorrow, sweetie. We should celebrate your first week of work. I stormed out of the restaurant and into the cool night air, gasping for breath. My mind was a whirlwind of panic and fury. I needed a lawyer. I needed help. I leaned against a brick wall trying to calm my racing heart and pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over the search bar. Just then, the screen lit up with a new email notification. It was from HR at my new company. The subject line was innocuous. Welcome aboard, payroll confirmation. I opened it, expecting a simple confirmation of my direct deposit details. My bank account and routing number were listed correctly. But then I saw a second section beneath it, a section I hadn't filled out on my onboarding forms. It was titled Wage Assignment Directive. It listed an entity I'd never heard of, Oak Haven Family Trust, and a series of account numbers, and next to it the directive was spelled out in cold corporate text. 50% of all gross compensation to be deposited per attached court-ordered agreement. They hadn't just planned this. They had already executed it. Before I even set foot in the office, before I earned a single dollar, they had already staked their claim. My paycheck was already gone. My phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the pavement. I stared at the glowing screen, the words court-ordered agreement burning into my retinas. A court order? How? How was that possible? I hadn't seen the inside of a courtroom in my life. I picked up the phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. There, attached to the HR email, was a PDF file. I tapped it open. It was an official-looking document stamped by a county clerk, complete with a case number. It was a stipulated judgment, a legal agreement filed with the court, signed by both parties to avoid a trial. The plaintiffs were my parents. The defendant was me. And my signature was right there at the bottom, notarized and dated. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was a different day, a few weeks after I'd signed the college paperwork. My dad had taken me to the bank to open a new account for managing my college expenses. The bank had a notary on staff. He'd slid another paper in front of me. "Just a formality," he'd said, his voice casual. "The bank needs this to authorize our access to the trust for your tuition payments. It just confirms our agreement." I was 18. I knew nothing about legal documents. I saw the word tuition and agreement, and it made sense in the context he'd provided. I had signed a confession of judgment, essentially pre-admitting guilt in a lawsuit that hadn't even happened yet, giving them the power to file it with the court without ever serving me papers or having me appear. They had built an ironclad legal cage around me before I even knew I was a prisoner. I stumbled down the street, feeling a cold, creeping dread that settled deep in my bones. This wasn't just a manipulative family agreement anymore. This was a legally binding judgment. My company's HR department wasn't asking for my permission. They were informing me of a legal obligation. My father's threat in the restaurant wasn't a bluff. He hadn't needed to sue me. He'd already won. For the next week, I was a ghost. I went to my new job, sat through orientation, and smiled at my new colleagues, all while a storm raged inside me. Every congratulations felt like a jab. Every welcoming smile felt like a mockery. I was living a lie. On the outside, I was the promising new hire, the bright young engineer with a 6-figure salary. On the inside, I was a bonded servant. I avoided their calls. I ignored their texts. The idea of going home for dinner was unthinkable. I slept on the couch of a college buddy, telling him my new apartment wasn't ready yet. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. I spent every waking hour outside of work in a frantic haze of research. I read about contract law, stipulated judgments, fraud in the inducement, undue influence. The legal fees for a consultation alone were staggering, money I didn't have. Especially since I knew that on my first payday, half of my money would be automatically diverted to an account I couldn't touch. Finally, I found a legal aid clinic that offered free consultations. I sat across from a tired-looking lawyer named Sarah, who listened patiently as my story tumbled out, a torrent of betrayal and legal jargon I had learned over sleepless nights. She looked at the copy of the judgment I'd printed out, her brow furrowed. "This is predatory," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The fact that they had you sign this at 18 without your own legal counsel, presenting it as something else entirely, that's a strong argument for unconscionability. But Alex, I have to be honest with you. Overturning a stipulated judgment is an uphill battle. It's incredibly difficult." "So what do I do?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Do I just let this happen? Do I let them take half of everything I ever earn?" "We can file a motion to vacate the judgment," she said, tapping her pen on the document. "Argue it was obtained through fraud. But it will be messy. It will involve depositions. Your parents will have to testify. You will have to testify against them. It will get ugly." The image of my mom on a witness stand, crying about how she only wanted to secure her son's future, flashed in my mind. I saw my dad, cool and collected, painting me as an ungrateful child who was trying to wriggle out of a fair deal. My stomach churned. This was exactly the public spectacle he had threatened me with. I left the clinic with a sliver of hope, but it was overshadowed by a mountain of dread. That night, I decided I couldn't hide at my friend's place forever. I had to face them. I had to get my belongings, my personal documents, my entire life out of that house. I drove there late, hoping they'd be asleep. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. I used my old key, the lock turning with a soft, familiar click. I moved silently, a thief in my own home, packing clothes and books into duffel bags. My goal was my desk, where I kept my birth certificate, my social security card, my passport. I opened the top drawer and my heart stopped. It was empty. The entire drawer had been cleared out. Frantically, I checked the others. All empty. My files, my documents, everything was gone. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding. My dad was standing in the doorway of my bedroom, silhouetted against the dim light of the hallway. He wasn't angry. He was just watching me. "Looking for something, Alex?" he asked, his voice calm and unnervingly quiet. "Where are my documents?" I demanded. "My passport, my birth certificate?" He held up a thick manila envelope. "Right here. We're keeping them for you, for safekeeping." "After all," he said, taking a step into the room, his shadow falling over me, "we can't have our biggest asset trying to run away, can we?" His words hung in the air, a chilling admission of ownership. I wasn't their son anymore. I was an asset, a piece of property to be managed and controlled. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The fear that had been paralyzing me for weeks began to burn away, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. The public spectacle, the fight, the ugliness Sarah had warned me about it, was nothing compared to the slow-motion death of living under their thumb. "Give them to me," I said, my voice low and steady, devoid of the panic he was expecting. "I don't think so," he replied, a smug little smirk playing on his lips. "You've been acting erratically, Alex. We're concerned. We think it's best we manage things for a while." "I'm not asking." I took a step toward him, and for the first time in my life, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He was so used to me being the compliant, obedient son that this quiet defiance was foreign territory. He clutched the envelope tighter. "This is our house, and you will show me respect," he hissed, his composure cracking. "This is a prison, and you're not my father. You're my warden," I shot back. "But your shift is over." I didn't lunge for the envelope. Instead, I pulled out my phone. My hands were perfectly still as I navigated to my call log and pressed Sarah's number. I put the phone on speaker. "Hi, Sarah, it's Alex. Sorry to call so late. I'm at my parents' house right now. My father is here, and he's refusing to return my personal documents, including my passport and birth certificate, which he took from my room without my permission. He's just referred to me as an asset and stated he can't have me running away. I believe that's called extortion and theft, isn't it?" Silence. My dad's face went pale. From the other end of the line, Sarah's voice was crisp and professional. "Yes, Alex, it is. Mr. Thompson, my name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm Alex's legal counsel. I would strongly advise you to return his property to him immediately. Withholding personal identification documents is a serious offense. Given the fraudulent nature of the judgment you filed, this new development would be of great interest to a judge." My dad stared at the phone in my hand as if it were a venomous snake. His confidence evaporated, replaced by a panicked rage. You think you can threaten me?" "He's not threatening you." Sarah's voice cut in, sharp as glass. "I am. I'm recording this call, by the way. Hand Alex his documents now." He looked from the phone to me, his jaw working silently. The entire foundation of his control was built on secrecy and my fear of exposure. I had just ripped that foundation apart. He knew, as well as I did, that a story about a tech company's new engineer being extorted by his parents was bad. But a story about them being investigated for theft and coercion was infinitely worse. With a hand that trembled with fury, he shoved the manila envelope into my chest. "Get out of my house!" he snarled. I didn't say a word. I took the envelope, walked past him without a backward glance, picked up my duffel bags, and left the house I grew up in for the last time. The legal battle was everything Sarah promised it would be. ugly, drawn out, and emotionally draining. My parents hired an expensive lawyer who painted me as a spoiled, ungrateful brat. They produced receipts for every diaper, every birthday present, every dollar spent on me for 18 years, framing it all as part of their investment. But their narrative began to crumble. Sarah was brilliant. She brought in financial experts who testified that no legitimate investment functions as a lifelong 50% claim on gross income. She brought in a psychologist who testified about financial abuse and undue parental influence. The turning point came during my father's deposition. Sarah presented him with the bank document I had signed, the one he'd passed off as a formality. She asked him to explain, under oath, why he had presented a stipulated legal judgment to his 18-year-old son as a simple bank authorization form. He blustered. He evaded. He lied. He claimed I had understood completely. But under Sarah's relentless, precise questioning, his story fell apart. The transcript was damning. Faced with the transcript and the recording of our last conversation, their lawyer advised them to settle. They knew that if this went before a judge, they wouldn't just lose, they could face criminal charges for fraud. A new agreement was drawn up. The original contract and the stipulated judgment were voided, completely and irrevocably. In exchange, I agreed to repay the original $50,000 at a reasonable interest rate over 10 years. It was a loan, plain and simple, which is what I had offered from the very beginning. My first full, untarnished paycheck felt like a miracle. I looked at the number on the deposit slip and felt a profound sense of relief, of ownership. It was mine. My work, my effort, my future. I immediately sent the first loan payment to the account stipulated in the new agreement. I included no note. I have not spoken to my parents since that night. Sometimes I feel a pang of sadness for the family I thought I had, but it's quickly replaced by the quiet, steady strength of knowing I chose myself. I bought my freedom, and while it came at a high cost, I know with every fiber of my being that it was the most valuable investment I will ever make.